The morning started like any other Tuesday in Washington, D.C. The Capitol building was buzzing with its usual energy. Staff members rushed through hallways carrying folders and coffee cups. Reporters gathered outside hearing rooms, adjusting their cameras and checking their notes. But nobody expected what was about to happen in Conference Room 2154. Representative Jasmine Crockett walked into the room with confidence. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she made her way to her seat. She had prepared for this education policy hearing for weeks. Today's topic was federal funding for schools, and she had strong opinions about how money should be spent. Across the room, Karoline Leavitt sat at a different table. As the White House press secretary, she was there to defend the current education policies. She looked calm on the outside, but inside she felt the pressure. These hearings could get heated quickly, and she knew Crockett had a reputation for asking tough questions. The room filled up with other officials, reporters, and a few students who had come to watch. One young man in the back row looked particularly interested. He wore a simple blue jacket and carried a worn backpack. His name was Tyler, and he was a community college student from Austin, Texas. He had driven 12 hours to be here because this hearing could decide if his financial aid would continue next year. Tyler wasn't alone in caring about this meeting. Across the country, thousands of students watched the live stream on their phones and laptops. They sat in dorm rooms, coffee shops, and library study areas. All of them worried about the same thing. How would they pay for school if the government cut education funding? The hearing started normally. The chairman read some opening statements. A few witnesses gave their prepared remarks. Everything seemed routine until Crockett's turn came to ask questions. She started by asking Leavitt about specific budget numbers. How much money would go to community colleges? What about students who needed extra help with basic math and reading? These were fair questions that everyone expected. But then something shifted in the room. Crockett leaned forward in her chair and her voice got sharper. She wasn't just asking about policy anymore, she was getting personal. "Ms. Leavitt," Crockett said, looking directly at her, "I'm curious about your background. Where did you go? To college?" Leavitt straightened up. She could sense where this was going, but she had to answer. "I attended St. Anselm College in New Hampshire." "And how did you pay for that education?" Crockett continued. "I received some financial aid and my family helped with the rest," Leavitt replied carefully. Crockett smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "So you had family support, that's nice. Not everyone is so lucky." The room got quieter. Even the reporters stopped typing and looked up from their notebooks. They could feel the tension building. "Tell me," Crockett went on, "do you think your privileged college experience gives you the right perspective to make decisions for students who work 3 jobs just to afford textbooks?" Leavitt's face flushed slightly. She knew she had to stay professional, but the question stung. "I believe I can represent all students' interests regardless of my personal background." "Really?" Crockett shot back. "Because from where I sit, it looks like someone who never worried about paying for lunch is now telling struggling families they don't deserve help with education." The room erupted. Other representatives started talking over each other. The chairman banged his gavel and called for order. But Crockett wasn't finished. "You talk about education policy like it's some abstract concept," she continued, her voice rising. "But for millions of students, this isn't theoretical. This is their future we're discussing. And frankly, I question whether someone from your background can truly understand what these students face every day." Leavitt took a deep breath before responding. She had been in tough spots before, but this felt different. This was personal. "Representative Crockett, I may have been fortunate in my education, but that doesn't mean I can't care about other students. In fact, it motivates me to help ensure others have the same opportunities I had." "Opportunities?" Crockett laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You call having wealthy parents an opportunity that others should have? That's not policy, that's privilege talking." In the back of the room, Tyler watched this exchange with growing frustration. He had come here hoping to hear real solutions. Instead, he was watching 2 powerful women argue about personal backgrounds while his own future hung in the balance. Tyler pulled out his phone and started recording. At first, he just wanted to save this moment to show his friends later. But as the argument continued, he realized something important was happening. These two women were supposed to be fighting for students like him, but instead they were fighting with each other. The argument went on for another 10 minutes. Crockett kept pushing about Leavitt's privileged background. Leavitt tried to defend herself while staying professional. Other committee members jumped in with their own comments. The whole thing became a mess of political theater. Meanwhile, the live stream was exploding with comments. Students watching from their schools were typing furiously. Some supported Crockett for calling out privilege. Others thought she was being unfair to Leavitt. But many, like Tyler, were just frustrated that nobody was talking about actual solutions. "This is embarrassing," typed one student from California. "They're supposed to help us, not fight each other. Why can't they just talk about the money?" wrote another from Florida. "I need to know if my grants are getting cut." The hearing finally ended after the chairman called for a recess. Crockett gathered her papers and left quickly, followed by reporters shouting questions. Leavitt stayed behind to talk with her staff, looking tired and frustrated. Tyler sat in the back row for a few more minutes, thinking about what he had just witnessed. He thought about his own story, working nights at a grocery store, taking care of his younger sister while his mom worked 2 jobs, struggling to pay for gas money to get to classes. Neither of these powerful women had mentioned stories like his. As he walked out of the Capitol building, Tyler's phone buzzed with notifications. The video clips from the hearing were already going viral on social media. People were taking sides, arguing about who was right and who was wrong. But Tyler noticed something troubling. Very few people were talking about the actual education policies that had brought everyone together in the first place. That evening, Tyler drove to a cheap motel outside the city. He couldn't afford to stay in D.C., but he also couldn't afford to drive straight home. He needed gas money to last until his next paycheck. As he sat on the uncomfortable bed, he scrolled through social media and watched the clips from the hearing, over and over again. The more he watched, the more frustrated he became. Not with Crockett or Leavitt specifically, but with the whole situation. Here were 2 smart, powerful women who could actually make a difference in students' lives. Instead of working together to solve problems, they had spent their time scoring political points against each other. Tyler thought about his classmates back home. There was Jennifer, who dropped out last semester because she couldn't afford both rent and tuition. There was David, who was falling asleep in class because he worked overnight shifts at a warehouse. There was Maria, who ate ramen noodles for every meal because that's all she could afford after buying her textbooks. None of these real struggles had come up in today's hearing. Instead, the focus had been on personal attacks and political drama. Tyler realized that while politicians argued about privilege and backgrounds, real students were making impossible choices between education and survival. He picked up his phone and opened the camera app. For a moment, he hesitated. Who was he, to comment on what had happened? He was just a 19-year-old community college student. He didn't have a degree in political science or communications. He had never been on television or written for a newspaper. But then he thought about his friends who were struggling. He thought about the other students who had watched today's hearing hoping for answers and getting political theater instead. Maybe someone needed to speak up for them. Maybe that someone could be him. Tyler pressed record and started talking. Tyler stared at his phone screen for what felt like forever. The red record button seemed to glow brighter in the dim motel room. Outside, he could hear trucks rumbling down the highway and the distant sound of a television from the next room. But inside his head, everything was quiet except for one question that kept repeating itself. What would he actually say? He had watched the hearing clips 3 more times since getting back to his room. Each time he felt the same mix of anger and disappointment. These were supposed to be the people fighting for students like him. Instead, they spent their time attacking each other while real problems went unsolved. Tyler thought about calling his mom back in Austin. She would probably tell him to stay out of politics and focus on his studies. "Keep your head down and work hard," she always said. "That's how you get ahead in this world." But keeping his head down hadn't stopped his financial aid from being at risk. Working hard hadn't made college any more affordable. He set the phone down and walked to the small window. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for a few big trucks and old cars like his own. This wasn't exactly the kind of place where political movements started, but maybe that was exactly the point. Tyler picked up his phone again and hit record. "Hey," he said, looking directly into the camera. His voice was shaky at first, but he kept going. "I'm not really sure how to start this, but I think someone needs to say something about what happened today." He paused and took a breath. The words were starting to come easier now. "My name is Tyler, and I'm a student at Austin Community College. I drove 12 hours to Washington, D.C. today to watch a hearing about education funding. I thought I might learn something about whether my financial aid would get cut next year. Instead, I watched two people argue about personal stuff while completely ignoring the real problems that students like me face every day." Tyler stood up and started pacing around the small room. The movement seemed to help him organize his thoughts. "Look, I don't know much about politics. I'm just a 19-year-old kid trying to get through school. But I know what it's like to choose between buying groceries and buying textbooks. I know what it's like to fall asleep in class because you worked until 3 in the morning at your job. I know what it's like to watch your friends drop out because they can't afford to continue." He sat back down on the bed, looking more directly at the camera now. "Representative Crockett, I get that you're trying to stand up for people like me. I really do. But attacking someone's background doesn't help me pay for my classes. And Ms. Leavitt, I understand you're trying to defend current policies, but those policies aren't working for a lot of us." Tyler paused the recording and played it back. He sounded more confident than he felt, but the message was clear. He hit record, again to continue. "Here's the thing that both of you missed today. It doesn't matter if someone came from a rich family or a poor family. What matters is whether they're willing to listen to students who are struggling right now and actually do something to help." He pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from his backpack. It was his schedule from last semester. "I want to show you what a typical week looks like for me. Monday through Wednesday, I have classes from 8 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. Then I drive straight to my job at Peterson's grocery store where I work until 11 at night. Thursday and Friday I have more classes, and then I work weekend shifts to make extra money. When exactly am I supposed to study? When am I supposed to have a normal college experience?" Tyler set the paper down and looked back at the camera. "My friend Jennifer had to drop out last semester. Not because she was failing her classes. She was actually on the honor roll. She dropped out because her car broke down, and she couldn't afford to fix it and pay tuition at the same time. She chose the car because she needed it to get to work." His voice was getting stronger now, more passionate. "My friend David falls asleep in our chemistry class almost every day. The professor thinks he doesn't care about school. But David works the night shift at a warehouse because that's the only job he could find that pays enough to help support his little brother. He cares about school so much that he's destroying his health trying to make it work." Tyler stood up again and walked closer to the phone. "And my friend Maria. She's probably the smartest person I know. She wants to be a nurse, but she's eating nothing but ramen noodles because that's all she can afford after buying her textbooks. She's getting sick from poor nutrition, but she won't quit school because this is her only chance to build a better life." He sat back down, his energy shifting from anger to something more like sadness. "These are the stories that should have been talked about today. These are the people who needed you to work together instead of fighting with each other. While you were arguing about privilege and backgrounds, Jennifer was probably working a double shift at the restaurant where she ended up after dropping out. David was probably trying to stay awake through another night of work. Maria was probably doing homework while feeling dizzy from not eating enough." Tyler paused and gathered his thoughts. He wanted to end this video on the right note. "I'm not trying to attack either of you personally. I'm sure you both got into politics because you wanted to help people. But today you didn't help anyone. You entertained people maybe. You gave them something to argue about on social media. But you didn't solve any problems." He leaned forward, speaking more quietly now, but with clear intensity. "Here's what I want both of you to know. Students like me, we're not statistics in your budget reports. We're not talking points for your political arguments. We're real people with real dreams, and we're working incredibly hard to achieve them despite all the obstacles in our way." Tyler picked up his backpack and pulled out another piece of paper. His transcript. I have a 3.7 GPA while working 30 hours a week. Jennifer had a 3.9 before she had to drop out. David maintains a 3.5 while working nights and taking care of his family. Maria has never gotten anything below an A-, even though she's literally making herself sick trying to afford school. He set the transcript down and looked directly at the camera again. We're not asking for handouts. We're not asking you to make college completely free or to solve all of our problems overnight. We're just asking you to remember that your decisions affect real people. When you argue about budget numbers, those numbers represent students who might have to choose between continuing their education and paying rent. Tyler could feel himself getting emotional, but he pushed through. When you fight about policy details, those details determine whether someone like Jennifer gets to finish her degree or spends the rest of her life wondering what might have been. When you score political points against each other, you're using our futures as ammunition in your battles. He took a deep breath and tried to organize his final thoughts. I know I'm just one student. I know you probably get lots of messages from people who disagree with your decisions, but I hope you'll listen to this one because I'm not trying to win an argument or prove a point. I'm just trying to help you understand what your job really means to people like me. Tyler stood up one more time, feeling like he needed to end strong. Tomorrow I'm going to drive back to Austin. I'm going to go to my classes and then to my job at the grocery store. I'm going to keep working as hard as I can to get my degree, regardless of what happens with education funding. But I really hope that the next time you two are in the same room, you'll remember this video. I hope you'll remember that there are students all over this country who are counting on you to work together instead of against each other. He walked closer to the phone for his final statement. We need you to be leaders, not fighters. We need you to solve problems, not create new ones. And we need you to remember that education isn't just a political issue. It's the foundation of people's dreams. Tyler reached over and stopped the recording. The room fell silent again, except for the sounds from the highway outside. He looked at the video file on his phone, wondering if he had the courage to actually post it. It was almost 15 minutes long, which felt like forever in the world of social media. Most people wouldn't watch something that long from a random college student they'd never heard of. But then he thought about Jennifer, David, Maria, and all the other students who were probably feeling the same frustration he felt after watching today's hearing. Maybe they needed to hear someone say the things he had just said. Maybe they needed to know they weren't alone in feeling disappointed by their representatives. Tyler opened his social media app and began uploading the video. In the caption box, he typed, "To the politicians fighting about education, here's what you're missing." Then he hit share and set his phone aside. He had no idea that within hours his simple message would reach thousands of people who felt exactly the same way he did. Tyler woke up to his phone buzzing like crazy. At first he thought his alarm was going off, but when he grabbed it from the nightstand, he saw dozens of notifications covering his screen. Messages, comments, shares, friend requests. His phone was going nuts. He sat up in the uncomfortable motel bed, confused and still half asleep. It took him a moment to remember where he was and what had happened the night before. Then it hit him. The video. He had posted that video of himself talking about the education hearing. His hands were shaking a little as he opened his social media app. The numbers didn't make sense at first. His video had been viewed over 50,000 times. 50,000. Tyler had never posted anything that got more than maybe 20 likes from his friends and family. The comments were pouring in faster than he could read them. Students from all over the country were sharing their own stories. A girl from Oregon wrote about working 3 jobs to pay for nursing school. A guy from Michigan talked about living in his car because he couldn't afford both rent and tuition. Someone from Florida shared a photo of their empty refrigerator with the caption, "This is what choosing textbooks over groceries looks like." Tyler's heart was racing. He had expected maybe a few friends to watch his video and tell him he was crazy for getting involved in politics. He never imagined strangers would care about what some random community college student had to say. But as he kept scrolling, he realized these weren't really strangers. They were students just like him, facing the same impossible choices he faced every day. They were people who had watched that hearing and felt the same frustration he felt. His video had somehow given them a voice for feelings they already had. A message popped up from his friend Carlos back home. "Dude, you're famous. Your video is all over my timeline. My sister shared it and she's at UT. People are talking about this everywhere." Tyler quickly scrolled through the shares and retweets. Carlos was right. The video was spreading beyond just his immediate social circle. College students were tagging their friends, parents were sharing it with comments like, "This young man understands what our kids are going through." Even some teachers and professors were posting it with messages of support. Then Tyler saw something that made his stomach drop. A blue checkmark account had shared his video. It was a reporter from a major news network, and she had written, "This student's response to yesterday's education hearing is more insightful than most political commentary." Thread with key quotes below. Tyler had never been mentioned by anyone with a blue checkmark before. He clicked on the reporter's profile and saw that she had over 1 million followers. Her thread about his video was getting thousands of likes and retweets. She had pulled out specific quotes from his video and highlighted them, calling his message authentic and refreshing. His phone rang, and Tyler jumped. The caller ID showed his mom's number. "Tyler, honey, what's going on?" His mom's voice sounded worried. "Your cousin Angela called me this morning saying you're all over Facebook. She said you made some kind of political video?" Tyler rubbed his face, trying to figure out how to explain this to his mother. "Mom, I just posted a video about the hearing. I went to yesterday. I didn't think anyone would really watch it." "Well, people are definitely watching it," she said. "Angela sent me the link and I watched the whole thing. Tyler, I'm proud of you for speaking up, but I'm also worried. You know how crazy people can get about politics." As if on cue, Tyler's phone started showing more notifications. Most of the comments were positive and supportive, but he was starting to see some negative ones too. A few people were calling him naive or saying he didn't understand how politics really worked. Others were trying to figure out which political party he supported, getting angry when they couldn't put him in a neat category. "Mom, I think I need to go," Tyler said. "My phone is going crazy and I need to figure out what's happening." After hanging up, Tyler took a shower and got dressed, trying to process everything. When he came back to his phone, the numbers had doubled. His video now had over 100,000 views and had been shared thousands of times. But more importantly, something else was happening. Students weren't just watching and sharing his video, they were making their own response videos. Tyler found dozens of clips from students at different schools, all talking about their own experiences with college costs and financial struggles. A student from California made a video showing her work schedule, classes during the day, restaurant job at night, weekend shifts at a retail store. She held up her bank statement showing how every dollar was accounted for, with nothing left over for emergencies. Someone from New York filmed himself in his tiny apartment, explaining how he and 3 roommates shared one bedroom to save money on rent. He talked about studying in the hallway because there wasn't room for all of them to have desks. A girl from Texas made a video while sitting in her car between classes and work, eating a peanut butter sandwich for lunch because it was the cheapest thing she could make. She thanked Tyler for saying what she had been feeling but couldn't put into words. Tyler realized his video had started something bigger than just one person's opinion. It had created a space for thousands of students to share their stories, many for the first time. These weren't political arguments or partisan talking points. They were real human experiences that had been invisible to most people. Around noon, Tyler's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. When he answered, a woman's voice said, "Hi, is this Tyler? This is Rebecca from Channel 8 News. We'd love to have you on our show to talk about your viral video about education." Tyler's heart started pounding again. I'm not sure I understand. You want me on TV?" "Your video has been shared over 1 million times since last night," Rebecca explained. "People are calling it the most authentic response to political theater they've seen in years. We'd love to give you a platform to expand on your message." 1 million times. Tyler couldn't even imagine that many people. He told Rebecca he would think about it and call her back. Over the next few hours, Tyler received calls from 5 different news shows, 3 radio stations, and 2 podcasts. Everyone wanted to interview the college student who had somehow captured what millions of people were feeling about politics and education. But Tyler was careful. He remembered watching politicians on TV who seemed to forget their original message once they got caught up in the attention. He decided to only accept interviews where he could stay focused on student issues rather than getting dragged into partisan politics. He chose to go on a morning show that promised to let him talk directly to viewers without interruption. When the producer called to confirm, she said something that surprised him. "Tyler, we've been covering politics for 20 years, and we rarely see responses like the one your video is getting. People from both political parties are sharing it. That's almost unheard of these days." Tyler spent the afternoon reading through more comments and messages. The responses were coming from everywhere. Not just college students, but parents, teachers, older adults who remembered their own struggles with education costs, and even some politicians. One message particularly caught his attention. It was from a woman named Patricia who wrote, "My daughter dropped out of college last year because we couldn't afford it. I've been feeling guilty ever since, wondering if I failed her somehow. Your video helped me realize that this isn't a personal failure. It's a system failure. Thank you for giving voice to something I couldn't explain." Another message came from a high school teacher. "I show my students news clips to teach them about current events, but most political coverage just makes them cynical about government. Your video is the first thing in years that's made them feel like their voices might actually matter." By evening, Tyler's video had been shared by major news outlets, celebrities, and politicians from both parties. But what struck him most was that the response wasn't really about politics at all. It was about recognizing the human cost of policy decisions and the importance of listening to people who are actually affected by those decisions. Tyler decided to make a follow-up video to address some of the responses he had received. This time, he felt more confident in front of the camera. "I want to thank everyone who watched and shared my video," he started. "I never expected this kind of response, and I'm honestly still trying to process it all. But I want to be clear about something. This isn't about me becoming famous or starting a political career. This is about making sure student voices are heard in conversations that affect our lives." He held up his phone, showing some of the messages he had received. "I've gotten thousands of messages from students sharing their own stories. Every single one of them matters. Every person who's choosing between textbooks and groceries, every student falling asleep in class because they work night shifts, every family making impossible financial decisions. Your experiences deserve to be part of these political conversations." Tyler paused, looking directly at the camera. "Some people have asked me which political party I support or what my solutions are for fixing education costs. Here's the truth. I don't have all the answers. I'm just a 19-year-old trying to get through community college. But I do know that solutions start with listening to the people who are actually living these problems." He picked up a folder full of printed messages from other students. "I'm going to keep sharing these stories, not because I want to be a political influencer, but because these voices deserve to be heard. And I hope that the politicians who make decisions about education funding will listen too." As Tyler finished recording his second video, he realized that something fundamental had changed. He was no longer just a student worried about his own financial aid. He had somehow become a spokesperson for thousands of students who felt forgotten by the political system. The question now was what to do with that responsibility. 3 weeks after Tyler's video went viral, he found himself sitting in a government building again. But this time, everything felt different. Instead of watching from the back row as an ignored observer, he was sitting at a table with a microphone in front of him. The nameplate read, "Tyler Chen, Student Representative." The room was packed with reporters, students, and politicians. Tyler recognized some faces from television, but he tried not to let that intimidate him. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment, reading through hundreds of messages from students and organizing their stories into clear points. Representative Crockett was there, sitting 2 tables away. She had reached out to Tyler personally after his video gained attention, apologizing for how the previous hearing had gone. "You were right," she had told him during their phone call. "We lost sight of what really mattered." Karoline Leavitt was also present, representing the White House position on education policy. She had surprised everyone by requesting that Tyler be invited to testify. In a public statement, she had said, "This young man reminded us all why we're here, to serve the people, not our own political interests." Tyler looked out at the audience and spotted several familiar faces. His mom had driven up from Austin, taking time off from her job to be there. Carlos was in the third row, holding up his phone to record everything. Even Jennifer was there, the friend who had dropped out of school. She had managed to scrape together enough money to restart her classes after Tyler's story brought attention to student financial struggles. The committee chairman called the hearing to order and introduced Tyler. As he began to speak, Tyler felt the same nervous energy he had felt in that motel room, but this time it was mixed with confidence. "Thank you for inviting me here today," Tyler began, his voice steady. 3 weeks ago, I was just another college student worried about paying for school. I never imagined I'd be sitting in this room, speaking to members of Congress. But that's exactly why I need to be here, because most students never get this opportunity. He pulled out a thick folder of papers, printed emails, messages, and stories from students across the country. Since my video went viral, I've received over 10,000 messages from students. I've read every single one of them, and I want to share some of their experiences with you today. Tyler opened the folder and pulled out the first letter. This is from Ashley in Oregon. She's studying to be a teacher, but she's considering dropping out because she can't afford both her student loan payments and rent. She works at a coffee shop 40 hours a week on top of her full class schedule. She wrote to me, "I want to teach kids, but I'm starting to think the system doesn't want people like me to become teachers." He set Ashley's letter aside and picked up another one. This is from Robert in Michigan. He's a veteran studying computer science on the GI Bill, but his benefits don't cover everything, so he's been sleeping in his car some nights to save money on housing. He told me, "I served my country overseas, and now I'm homeless while trying to get an education to build a better life." Tyler could see some of the committee members leaning forward, paying close attention. Even the reporters had stopped typing and were listening carefully. This is from Linda in Florida. She's a single mother of 2 young kids trying to finish her nursing degree. She attends classes online because she can't afford childcare during the day. She studies after her children go to bed, usually until 2 or 3 in the morning. Then she gets up at 6 to get the kids ready for school before going to her job at a medical clinic. Tyler set down Linda's letter and looked directly at the committee members. "I could read you hundreds more stories just like these. Students who are working multiple jobs, sleeping in cars, choosing between food and textbooks, dropping out despite good grades because they simply can't afford to continue. These aren't isolated cases. This is the reality for millions of students across America." Representative Crockett raised her hand to ask a question. "Tyler, what do you think we've been missing in our approach to education policy?" Tyler had been expecting this question. He had thought about it every day since his video went viral. "Representative Crockett, I think the biggest problem is that most education policy is made by people who haven't been students in decades. The cost of college has changed dramatically, but the conversations about it haven't kept up with reality." He pulled out a piece of paper with some numbers he had researched. When many of you were in college, a student could work a part-time job over the summer and pay for most of their tuition. Today, a student working minimum wage would have to work over 60 hours a week, year-round, just to pay tuition at a public university. That doesn't include books, housing, food, or any other expenses. Karoline Leavitt spoke up. "Tyler, the administration has proposed several programs to help with college costs. What's your perspective on current federal aid programs?" Tyler appreciated that she was asking for his honest opinion, rather than trying to defend existing policies. "Ms. Leavitt, federal aid programs help a lot of students, including me, but they haven't kept pace with rising costs. The maximum Pell Grant covers a much smaller percentage of college expenses than it did 20 years ago. And the application process is so complicated that many eligible students don't even apply." He pulled out another letter from his folder. This is from Danny in Nevada. He didn't apply for financial aid his first year because the forms were so confusing and intimidating. He thought his family made too much money to qualify. but it turns out he would have received significant aid. By the time he figured this out, he had already taken out expensive private loans to pay for school. Tyler set the letter down and continued. I've also heard from students who qualified for aid but didn't receive enough to cover their actual costs. The formulas used to calculate financial need don't always reflect reality. A family might look okay on paper but be struggling with medical bills, caring for elderly relatives, or other expenses that don't show up in the calculations. One of the other committee members asked, "What specific changes would you recommend?" Tyler had prepared for this question by organizing suggestions from the students who had contacted him. First, increase the maximum Pell Grant amount to cover a larger percentage of actual college costs. Second, simplify the financial aid application process so more eligible students actually apply. Third, create more pathways between community, colleges, and four-year universities so students can save money on their first 2 years. He flipped through his notes. Fourth, expand work-study programs so students can gain relevant experience while earning money for school. Fifth, provide emergency funding for students who face unexpected financial crises, like Danny, whose car broke down during finals week and who almost had to drop out because he couldn't get to campus or work. Tyler paused and looked around the room. But honestly, the most important change would be for people in positions like yours to regularly talk to current students, not just during campaign season or when there's a crisis, but ongoing conversations about what's actually working and what isn't. Representative Crockett nodded. Tyler, you've mentioned that students from both political parties have responded to your message. How do you think we can move beyond partisan politics when it comes to education? This was the question Tyler had been hoping someone would ask. Representative Crockett, here's what I've learned from reading thousands of messages from students. We don't care about political parties when we're choosing between rent and textbooks. A Republican student struggling to pay for nursing school has the same problems as a Democratic student in the same situation. Tyler stood up, feeling more passionate now. Students want solutions, not political theater. We want to know that our representatives are working together to solve problems, not using our struggles as talking points in their arguments with each other. He gestured toward the audience where students were sitting. Most of the students who contacted me after my video weren't asking me to support one party or another. They were asking me to keep telling their stories because they felt like nobody in government was listening to them. Karoline Leavitt asked, "What would you say to critics who argue that students today expect too much government assistance?" Tyler had heard this criticism many times over the past few weeks. Ms. Leavitt, the students I've heard from aren't asking for handouts. They're working incredibly hard, often harder than previous generations had to work to afford college. They're asking for the same opportunities that were available to earlier generations. He pulled out his own transcript and work schedule. I maintain a 3.7 GPA while working 30 hours a week. My friend Jennifer had a 3.9 before she had to drop out. These aren't students who are lazy or entitled. These are students who are working themselves to exhaustion trying to achieve their dreams. Tyler sat back down and organized his final thoughts. I want to end by saying something to everyone watching this hearing. 3 weeks ago, I was just a frustrated student who felt like his voice didn't matter. But I learned that when you speak honestly about your experiences, people listen, and when enough people speak up together, things can actually change. He looked directly at the camera that was broadcasting the hearing live. To the students watching this, your experiences matter. Your struggles are valid, and your voices deserve to be heard in conversations about policies that affect your lives. Don't wait for someone else to speak up for you. Share your stories. Contact your representatives. Make sure they understand what your daily life actually looks like. Tyler turned back to the committee members. And to the elected officials here and watching, thank you for giving me this opportunity. But more importantly, thank you for showing that it's possible to put students first instead of politics first. I hope this hearing is just the beginning of more conversations between students and the people who make decisions about our futures. The hearing continued for another hour, with other witnesses and more questions. But as Tyler packed up his folder of student stories, he realized something important had happened. This wasn't just about him anymore, or even about his original video. Students across the country had found their voices, and politicians were starting to listen. After the hearing, Tyler was surrounded by reporters and students wanting to talk. But the moment that meant the most to him was when Jennifer came up and hugged him. "Tyler," she said, "I'm back in school because of what you started. Thank you for not giving up on people like us." As Tyler walked out of the Capitol building, he thought about how much had changed since that frustrated night in the motel room. He was still the same 19-year-old community college student, still working at the grocery store, still worried about paying for school. But now he knew that one authentic voice could make a difference, and that students didn't have to accept being ignored by the people who were supposed to represent them. The real change was just beginning.